Never have I seen such a deranged father, who lured his own daughter into a basement, then quietly left, cruelly locking the iron door. After that, the daughter faced 24 years of imprisonment, and over 3,000 instances of brutal sexual assault, and even gave birth to 3 children in the dark, airless basement. What's even more appalling is that this story is based on a true event. The Austrian cellar case, the movie Girl in the Cellar. If there's anything scarier than a horror movie, it's definitely a work based on a true crime. This story begins with a girl named Sarah. Approaching her 18th birthday, she was very happy, because once she turned 18, she could leave home, and most importantly, escape her father, Lao Tang's, control. Lao Tang was a man with an extremely strong desire for control, and when he got angry, he would even resort to violence against his family. His wife and daughter Amy became submissive under his control. But Sarah alone was a rebellious teenager, constantly defying Lao Tang. "You won't let me go out. I'll go to the party anyway," even though Lao Tang repeatedly warned her to stay home. But Sarah wouldn't give up. Her boyfriend Chris was waiting for her in the woods. Ignoring Lao Tang's warning, she snuck out under the cover of darkness to meet her boyfriend. When Lao Tang discovered it, Sarah's room was already empty. At the party, Sarah had a great time with her biker boyfriend, and they pledged their love to each other, exchanging heartfelt promises. Chris also promised to get her a pink helmet. The next day, Lao Tang saw Chris taking his daughter home, and a surge of anger filled him. He stepped forward, blocking his daughter from entering, and unleashed a torrent of abuse upon her. But Lao Tang only received Sarah's disdain and a withering look. She also declared that after she turned 18, she never wanted to see him again. Soon after, Sarah excitedly shared her plans with her mother and sister. She would travel the world with her boyfriend, working part-time while traveling, and sending postcards home along the way, so they didn't need to worry. Things her mother and sister wanted to do but dared not, Sarah was able to achieve, so they naturally supported Sarah. Unfortunately, their father overheard their conversation. In the eyes of Lao Tang, the father, the head of the household, he had absolute authority and control over his children's lives, and the submissive mother and sister fueled his arrogance. Lao Tang went to the basement and opened a hidden door, a secret room known only to him, and he hatched a deranged plan. 3 months later, Amy and his wife went out, leaving only Sarah and Lao Tang at home. Lao Tang asked his daughter to help him carry a wooden crate into the basement. This was the first time Sarah knew about the secret room. There were no windows, only a vent, and Sarah felt a little uneasy. As she wondered, Lao Tang had already locked her in the basement. Sarah realized something was wrong. She rushed forward and shouted loudly, but there was no response from outside. It turned out that the specially designed iron door and glass could block all sounds. No matter how loudly someone screamed inside, the sound wouldn't reach the surface. If it were the end of the world, this would be a safe haven. But in this dysfunctional family, it became a prison for his daughter. Sarah opened the crate and found it full of supplies. Her mother and sister were very worried about Sarah's disappearance, but Lao Tang just calmly read the newspaper, as if it didn't concern him. For the first few days, Sarah pleaded desperately, but Lao Tang remained unmoved. Her attempts to escape all ended in failure. She fought back with a makeshift blade from a can, but due to the disparity in strength, she failed. Sarah didn't manage to kill him. Instead, she was thrown against the wall by Lao Tang. Lao Tang simply left with a cold remark.
"I say you can. Everything that you get now, every privilege, you will."
After Sarah's mysterious disappearance, her mother immediately called the police, but when questioned by the police, Lao Tang remained impassive, simply blaming everything on his daughter's rebelliousness, suggesting she might have just run away. The police didn't doubt Lao Tang's words, because he was Sarah's father. The father halo served as Lao Tang's protection. The next day, Chris, her boyfriend, also came looking for Sarah, but the father fabricated a childhood friend named Steve. It was also said that Sarah had eloped with Steve long ago. Chris believed it, feeling that his previous promises were all illusions, and could only leave sadly in the end. The police returned empty-handed, his wife and daughter helpless, and Sarah's boyfriend seemed to have given up as well. Old Tang became even more unscrupulous. On Sarah's 18th birthday, he brought Sarah a red dress, and said that as long as she pleased him, Sarah could have everything. Old Tang was indeed happy. Sarah had wanted a television, but the reward was ultimately less than expected. Only a clock in return. The clock ticked away, second by second, but Sarah felt no sense of living. Whenever Sarah displeased Old Tang, he would make her wear the red dress. What the red dress signified was self-evident. After being imprisoned for 354 days, Sarah's belly grew. Her first child a daughter, while the other 3 were boys. But old Tang still didn't let her go, but instead made her raise her children in the dungeon. These children had never seen the outside world since birth. All malnourished. Sarah outwardly complied with old Tang, but inwardly never gave up on escaping. Unable to raise 3 children in the dungeon, she discussed with old Tang taking her youngest son, who was just born, upstairs, then forging a letter, falsely claiming she had married elsewhere, but that life was difficult, financially strained, and asking her mother for help in raising him. Meanwhile, Sarah secretly placed a plea for help in the baby's crib for her mother. But unfortunately, old Tang discovered it in the end, and tore up the letter in front of Sarah, then cut off the power, nearly suffocating Sarah and her children as punishment. But Sarah still didn't give up. On a stormy night, she noticed the basement was leaking, so Sarah used a spoon to dig through the wall, and used a flashlight to signal for help. When a passerby noticed, they told old Tang directly, "There's a strange light source in your basement. It looks like a distress signal." An enraged old Tang reinforced the dungeon, and Sarah's last hope was dashed. Time flew by, and Sarah spent 20 years in a less than 10 square meter, sunless dungeon. Time had worn away Sarah's sharp edges, drained not only her aspirations for the future, but also her hope for life. At this time, Sarah's son and daughter were already teenagers, and the cramped space could no longer contain their longing for the outside world. Sarah finally decided to tell her children the truth. And her son, upon learning everything, deeply hated old Tang, even fighting with old Tang directly. Old Tang realized he might lose control of them, and decided to pipe car exhaust into the basement, secretly killing them. But his actions were interrupted by his third son, who suddenly came to the garage, though a small amount of exhaust still entered the basement. The poor conditions caused Sarah's eldest daughter to have an asthma attack, and a turning point finally arrived. Sarah desperately begged old Tang to take them to the hospital, calling old Tang dad for the first time in 24 years. Old Tang's heart softened, and under the cover of night, took Sarah and her eldest daughter to the hospital. At the hospital, Sarah knew this was her last chance, and seized this unique opportunity, running to the police. At the end of the film, old Tang was arrested, and the devil who had hidden for 20 years received his punishment. Sarah escaped the dungeon with her children, reuniting with her mother and sister, and finally started a new life. Sarah's boyfriend, Chris, hadn't dated anyone since her disappearance, and on this day he brought a pink helmet. 24 years later, but still remembered his promise to Sarah. As a film based on a true story, Dungeon Girl is a depressing and dark story, with a stark contrast between life upstairs and life downstairs. Upstairs warm and comfortable, downstairs a dark, cold storage room. The youngest son, raised outside the dungeon, despite being the youngest, was strong and healthy and had a cheerful personality. The other children, kept in the dungeon, were malnourished, each of them painfully thin. While the story ends relatively well, the real-life Austrian dungeon case had a far more brutal and surreal ending. The case took place in Austria. In reality, the father's abuse didn't begin when his daughter turned 18, but when she was 11. Not for 20 years, but for 24 years, and not 3 children, but 7. After being imprisoned, the daughter once escaped, but the police returned her to her father, citing her young age. 24 years of imprisonment, over 3,000 instances of abuse, countless beatings and mistreatment. One child, born prematurely, had breathing difficulties, but the father didn't take the child to a doctor. Instead, he watched as the child stopped breathing, then threw the body into a furnace to destroy the evidence. 3 children were confined to the dungeon from birth, never seeing the light of day, while 3 others were formally adopted by their father. Until the daughter's eldest child turned 19. Fell unconscious due to a serious illness and was hospitalized. Doctors discovered she had a rare disease, and requested the police to locate her biological mother for medical history. This is how the truth was revealed. However, by then, the victims could no longer live normal lives. In the movie, Sarah escapes her father's clutches, and overcomes her inner trauma. But in reality, the world's malice towards the victims was omnipresent. After his arrest, the father showed no remorse, even boasting shamelessly, "I am meant to rule women." Because Austria doesn't have the death penalty, he was sentenced to life imprisonment, but the maximum sentence is only 20 years. But after the truth was revealed, this notorious wolf in sheep's clothing received over 300 love letters. Even more ironically, the dungeon where the daughter was imprisoned has become a popular tourist attraction. No punishment is sufficient for such a monster, nor can it ever compensate for the suffering inflicted on the victims, while the outside world, the onlookers, either mocks or satisfies their morbid curiosity, while the true victims are pushed into an inescapable abyss. Alright, that's the story for today. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time with more exciting content.